Hi, I'm Stu Davies, Ocean Caring Digital Strategist. This podcast dives into the real stories behind ocean caring brands, organizations, and ocean tech innovators. Welcome to A Drop in the Ocean. Each episode explores the wins, challenges, and lived experiences of people working to protect our seas, from grassroots campaigners to global initiatives, and from early-stage ocean tech to large-scale conservation programs. But this is more than just storytelling. Along the way, we'll also connect these change makers with experts in marketing, communications, AI, storytelling, and strategy, sharing practical insights to help all of us amplify our impact. One drop in the ocean becomes many. Let's make some waves together. And welcome to the next episode of A Drop in the Ocean. I'm really excited about this month's guest. So today I've got Lorena Neira, who is a biologist and the founder and CEO of Blusink, a deep tech venture pioneering a new approach to ocean carbon removal. I've been really wanting to get some good ocean tech companies representatives on the show. I think you came across my desk from my colleague Tom Freyberg, who passed your details to me. So pleased you said yes to be in a podcast. Lorena, welcome.
Thank you, Stu, and thank you for having me here. I'm also very excited about this conversation.
So we have got you remotely. Whereabouts in the world are you today?
Yeah, I'm in Colombia at the moment.
Whoa, I think that's the farthest guess that we've had so far. Lorena, I always ambush my guests with a question I haven't sent them. So this is it. Could you please share with our audience your fondest memory of the ocean?
Yeah, that's actually a very clear memory. So you're not quite ambushing me, but it's a memory I have from one of my. Whenever I was a researcher in the past, I was lucky enough to go on board a couple of ships and do transatlantic and transpacific expeditions, and I do have this very clear memory of me on the deck of one of those sailboats, just looking at. That night we had something called a cloud galaxy, which is very spectacular to just witness. And we also had a night rainbow that night. And I remember I was pretty young. I think I was probably 21 by the time. And I do remember myself thinking I had two options between going for just very hardcore lab molecular biology or ocean-oriented work. And I remember thinking to myself, well, probably the fascination I'm feeling right now for the ocean, it's a very good career opportunity as well. And just like a very good opportunity to have a successful career in something that is meaningful and fulfilling. So I think that's probably my best memory, just deciding to go for ocean research and ocean work.
No, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that memory. So you're the CEO of a what I'd call an ocean tech company called Blusink. What is Blusink? What is it that you're doing?
Yeah, so Blusink is something that I like to call a tech to nature based solution. And what we do is we're a carbon removal company, but the carbon removal we exert also scales restoration, specifically seafloor restoration. So that's what we are. We also work at the intersection of materials engineering, meaning we use material sciences to exert that carbon removal and that biodiversity restoration.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, what really drew me to it is it's not just technology in the ocean. It's actually doing something which has an extremely positive impact in the ocean. You've got a negative impact. You know, you're actually taking carbon out as opposed to anything that's contributing or is net.
Yeah. So a way I like to use to explain people what we do is whenever you think about the different marine ecosystems that you have there, right? So you can think of them even as forests, which is something that definitely is more familiar with for the majority of the people. So if you think about those marine forests are usually suffering disturbances and the consequences of some anthropogenic impacts, but also climate impacts that are coming as a consequence of climate change, right? So let's think for a second about a coral reef that has been impacted by a hurricane or other type of disturbance. What you are going to see there is probably that seafloor and that space is going to be depleted, and life is going to be kind of like affected by it, right? So what we do is we spread minerals, or like think of it also as fertilizers on that seafloor to revive the life there. Most of the marine ecosystems usually go on cycles of small larvae that start growing on the seafloor and form very big structures, right? Like coral reefs are something that we can watch from space, right? So that's how big those ecosystems get. And because of climate change, they're taking even slower to grow. So what we do is we provide the shortcut that they need by means of deploying the structures that we deploy that we actually call Blusinkies, right? So you can think of Blusinkies as apple-sized structures that we deploy on the seafloor, and that can do two things, right? So the first thing that it does is it removes carbon, and it removes carbon by something that is very standard to the space right now, or at least the ocean-based carbon removal space, which is called ocean alkalinity enhancement. Right? That in very simple terms is in a reaction in the ocean, so buffering some seawater, raising alkalinity, and that sequesters some CO2. That grabs CO2 that is in the atmosphere and in the water and transforms it in different species of carbon, right? It can be bicarbonates, it can be carbonates. It's simply the process of taking that CO2 and transforming it in something else. Once it does that, because our apple-sized structures are made of a material that can have that reaction as well, or that effect in the ocean, the structures can be inherited by ecosystems, things like ecosystem fragmentation, which is, for instance, when you had square kilometers of coral reef, but maybe it's fragmented at some sections, and so fish cannot travel the same way across the reef, but are isolated to fragmented pieces of that ecosystem.
Oh, wow, it's fantastic. So, I mean, almost a coral bridge.
Yeah, exactly. It's a coral bridge.
Okay. Wow. I mean, yeah, it's incredible. And Lorena, what first connected you to the ocean, science, and climate tech?
I think for me it was definitely first just sciences, right? I've always been very scientifically framed. I actually started in university as a chemical engineering major. The oceans came later with different experiences. So I think it's just, for me, it's definitely an interest for science, and science as a tool to build better opportunities for people, better quality of life, better nature as well. And I think the ocean was probably a layer that came afterwards. I usually just sail and also dive for fun. So I think I just among the ecosystems, that's probably the one that I enjoy the most.
Yeah, I hear you. Can you share how Blusink came to be? What was the insight or the idea that sparked it? Because it's quite novel. It's quite unique.
It was very serendipitous, I would say, because so it came to be as a part of my master research. As a researcher, I had never thought about entrepreneurship as a career path, right? I almost bumped into it. So I was researching about coral bioerosion patterns and how to standardize that for the scientific community. I was doing that during the pandemic. So I remember deploying the first nodules of Blusink material in the ocean right before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, that kind of kept me very separate from those deployment sites. So I couldn't really check the material for something like a year or 2 years. And when we went back to the sites, we realized the material wasn't as good to doing the thing that we were intending it to do, but it was really good at growing carbon removing species, which by then were coralline algae bundles, right? So those things usually trap organic carbon within those structures, rhodolite rocks as well. So I started thinking to myself, like probably the blue carbon space, carbon markets are a good alternative for this. And by then, I also remember thinking, well, probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to patent or publish this, hand it over to someone that is trained to build a business around it. I think I've always been a very practical person. So I think by then I was also concerned in having a blended career, right? Not just science to publish papers, but also probably something else. I hadn't defined the tools quite well. And then, the deeper I got into the entrepreneurial space, I realized I could be that founder, and probably I should be that founder. I'm a big advocate for other scientists I think especially for science-based ideas, you need a pretty fair understanding of what the science entails to build a reasonable and balanced vision for those technological approaches. So that's how it started. I can say very confidently so that it started more as a biodiversity approach, and then the carbon approach just grew, right? So through the OAE angle that we added to it. So what we did was simply, and was one of our pivots that we can tell the story about, was understanding that the material, the chemical composition at least, could be improved and optimized for carbon removal, but that we shouldn't stop spending the time, the effort, and the funding manufacturing the nodules, because that was going to bring at the end the big differentiator to that carbon removal technology, which was the structures that were capable of building those coral bridges, as you were saying before.
Okay, well, I mean, it's fun. I love the name as well, the branding, the Blusinkies. I like what you've done there. So how did you land on the approach? It's and what I love as well is because of the pandemic, it stayed in the water for a long time, and that's and that kind of thing happening has potentially created this product that you're now the CEO of a business, and I love that story, that serendipity. How did you land on that approach? How did you come up with that?
Yeah, I think whenever we always have the duality of talking to someone that is very carbon oriented versus someone that is very biodiversity oriented, and what we've done to land on the final approach is to try to marry those two understandings of what should need to be optimized and what the solution should be about. So on one end, the reason why we manufacture apple size nodules, which are Blusink, is optimized for biodiversity, right? So we need them to be that size, that geometry, so they kind of like have as a consequence all of the dynamics that we need to target biodiverse species, right? Not just generic algae or turf that would be attached to any type of structure you deploy into the water, but the kind of target species that we're looking for to restore those seafloors. And then on the other end, as I was saying, just integrating very fairly the OAE angle, which requires certain minerals that we need to target, optimize, not just for marine safety, but also for reactivity.
Okay, so you're actually so it's engineered to target specific growth from specific species who make that coral bridge or that ecosystem structures.
Who are having a harder time right now.
Of course, right.
Which is the key, right? Like whatever you deploy into the ocean, and this is probably something that people that are not very familiar with the ocean would not have an intuition for, but whatever you deploy into the ocean, it's going to be taken by something, right? Like if maybe you toss a glass bottle into the ocean, that's probably going to get some sort of colonization by certain species. That doesn't necessarily mean restoration. Restoration is a bit more complex than that. So it requires taking caring about and taking the time to optimize the materials that are going to be able to exert those objectives.
Okay, fantastic. And can you share any early deployment or case studies?
Yeah, absolutely. So our first year of deployments, we made one key decision that it's still very relevant till now. It's proven very relevant till now, which was proven this in contrasting ocean sites, right? We've always have in mind the vision of this should be cheap enough, simple enough, just like practical enough to be deployed globally, because the climate crisis, it's really a global problem, so it requires a global solution as well. So on that first year, we scaled with a commercial partner here in Colombia, which was the national port. We also did a deployment in Portugal with a blended partner, and a deployment in the Maldives. And that was just the first year with a research partner. And all of those deployments were very different because the ocean conditions were different, but it helped us prove one thing, which was that concept that I was mentioning before. The material was successfully targeting species that were relevant for restoration, not just genetic and turf, but species that were key for those places, and species that were probably not finding the naturally occurring substrates, because the ocean is not, of course, foreign to climate change, right? So like it suffers from ocean acidification, which is something that dissolves those naturally occurring structures that are needed in the ocean so these species thrive, right? So it helps us prove that the concept for biodiversity restoration was being successful at targeting those species that were relevant for those restoration purposes, even in very contrasting ocean sites. I think the most recent deployment that have really struck me is a deployment in Ambon Island. It's an island in Indonesia within the Coral Triangle. And it's been the most extreme biodiversity that I've seen on Blusink. We just finished now doing the biodiversity kind of reporting that we do internally for the client for that project. And I saw Blusink with, up to 8 tunicates and sponges per structure, 4 coral recruits per structure. And then again, like to put into context, our structures are not bigger than 6 centimeters diameter. So that's really great results. And we're also just really looking forward to expand our project in that region.
Yeah, wow. So, what are you're touching on this, but the benefits beyond carbon does Blusink aim to unlock?
Yeah, so essentially biodiversity is very important, and it's kind of crucial because I'm still waiting for the space to catch up and provide an economic valuation to everything that has to do with biodiversity. In places like what I was mentioning just before, it can mean restoration of those coral reefs that have a direct implication in food security, right? Like you don't really need to look very forward to understand there's knowledge that is built in those regions in which especially the local communities understand pretty well that because they lost a portion of the reef in some area, they cannot go fish there anymore. So there's a direct link again in some things, in things that are economically important, hence haven't been economically valued. But the will is there, always there to restore those places because just the local communities and the local ecosystems, more talking about was fishermen and whatnot, are very aware of those facts. And the second is probably coastal protection, right? There are many solutions right now working, can be addressed using 2 types of logics. The first logic is, of course, building the coastal protection ourselves, right? So that means deploying maybe huge structures that are most of the time cement-based or biocement-based. Concrete, exactly, which I think it's probably a solution that comes when there's nothing else to do and we're probably too late to act. But my thesis and my personal preference is we'll start working on those matters way before that, so we can have the same coral reefs and ecosystems naturally doing that and doing that for free, even, right? Which is the way we've having it our entire lives.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break there and then come back in part 2 where we're going to deep dive into how you came from a science startup to a commercial strategy. So we'll be back real soon.
You're listening to A Drop in the Ocean, the podcast that brings together ocean changemakers and digital experts, helping us all amplify our impact. If you're listening to this and thinking, we're doing important work, but our digital strategy just isn't quite landing, that's exactly what I help you with. Find me at stu-davies.com.
Welcome back to A Drop in the Ocean. Today's guest I've got with me is Lorena Neira, who is the CEO of Blusink. Welcome back, Lorena.
Thank you, Stu.
So this section, and when we chatted on our pre-podcast chat, we really wanted to kind of bring out this story of how you went from a scientific startup to being a successful commercial model, and the challenges of that and the successes you've had with that. So I think before we start diving into some of this, who are you actually your clients? Who's purchasing the technology? How did you come to the point where you've done this thing and it during the pandemic and you knew it was something? How did then you decide to like sell that to somebody and it was of value?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes a village. I think to the question of who are our clients, it's probably a combination of we have a fair understanding of who our clients are. We probably know we're young enough for that to still change and be kind of like optimized, right? I think, for the client segment understanding question, what I could reply is that's also one of the things that have pivoted, and that's probably a work in progress to this day. So when we started the company and when we started building the business model, we definitely were envisioning ourselves as a carbon, pretty straightforward carbon removal company where we're going to be offering this for someone interested in carbon offsets, deploy the tech, quantify the carbon, sell it. Pretty straightforward process. So in that journey, I think our first understanding of our client segment was, it definitely needs to be someone that is willing to fund the technology. That is any company basically that emits carbon to a fair amount should be compensated. And then probably stakeholders that have something that we call legs in the ocean. So that translates into licensed areas of ocean that they're using for certain purpose where we can deploy at, and they can give us that regulatory access for to those areas. So that very probably, some people might be imagining who that might be. For us, that was ports and offshore wind farms. Because for these kind of partner, they have one thing in common: a bunch of unutilized maritime space. Right. So in the port case, it's because you need the space to allow the maritime traffic. For offshore wind farms, is because of a simple engineering condition, you cannot quite place a turbine next to the other one, right? Like you need to enable some space. So that leaves them with a bunch of unutilized maritime space, and of course, carbon and environmental objectives that are very key also to their business, right? Because there are businesses that happen in the ocean and they need a healthy ocean to continue to go business as usual. So we started with those client segments. Those are still our client segments and people we're still working on. We're actually, I would love to give you the premise, but I can't quite now, but we're actually going to announce a very good project with quite big maritime infrastructure company this year. We're very, very, very excited about that one. But just to sum to that, I think something that has that the time we've been out in the space have taught us is client segments are usually not that straightforward, at least not for the kind of solution that we're trying to push. Because for us and for our business model, the way we've been building it, it's kind of funny because the beneficiary is not the same as the buyer in many of the cases. right? So before I was mentioning, probably the people that are gonna first see the consequences of deploying our technology are not necessarily those buyers, but are going to be the communities that are noticing the benefits of adhering biodiversity restoration to a carbon removal solution that has the profitable framework to operate at. And so in that journey, we've realized actually restoration providers are a great client segment for us as well, because they have also the regulatory access to those maritime spaces. But most importantly, they have the operational to deploy our technology. They actually can enrich our operational knowledge to do that in different environments. So what we've been doing right now, it's also grow a different revenue pathway that includes people that are, for instance, working in, I don't want to mention coral reefs too much because they're not the only ecosystem we can deploy at, but coral restoration providers has been another segment as well to just expand deployment and potentially backtrack on the carbon that was captured through those deployments as well in the future.
Wow, yeah, it's it's such a wonderful idea. And what do they say? Sometimes sniff what sells. So you kind of let see with these things. Let's see how the market pings it up. So scientific innovation is one thing, but you've turned it into a business and a market offering. How has that transition been like?
Yeah, I think that transition has definitely been the hardest, but also the most fascinating part of it, right? So as someone that's scientifically trained, you're very used to say, so on this hand, but also this, right? But there's complexity in this and whatnot. I think in business, you need way more clarity than that. So the transition has been learning to translate those very profound complexities about the ocean health and what we need to do for biodiverse ecosystems to happen. And by the way, just as a parenthesis, whenever I talk about biodiversity, it's very strange. And I've understood recently I need to really clarify it. But whenever you think about biodiversity, please do think as ecosystems that are going to be naturally, scalably, in a very cost-effective manner, also scaling carbon removal, because that's what comes with biodiverse ecosystems. They naturally and in a very healthy way also remove that carbon. That's the problem we have right now, because we have a biodiversity loss crisis. We're emitting even more carbon. More carbon is being released back to the atmosphere. So, I'm going to close the parenthesis there. But I think that the biggest learning has been, business needs way more clarity. So I think that's what the process has been, learning how to translate those very, very complex concepts into something that investors and partners can act on. It's really just tell them, here's what it is, here's how you can participate. Kind of you want to remove carbon, okay, but let's talk about also investing in restoring this fishery, or is your objective or the thing you have in mind more of an ESG goal? Sure, that's great, right? But let's talk about what real quantifiable biodiversity looks like and what that entails. It's kind of that's what the process has been.
Yeah, and I can imagine with some stakeholders, tech investors, they're looking for what could the return be? What's the go-to-market strategy? What's the, you have to turn what you've done into something like that as well, which is a step change.
Right, and I think something very important is, and this is something that is part of all of our conversations with clients and supporters, is first of all, it's very important that we start talking about the elephant in the room, which is the very evident trade-off that exists between funding, quality of those projects, and then the time it takes. Right, restoration takes time. It takes funding. And that literally has a consequence, or very evidently so has a consequence on the quality of those projects and the outcomes. So that's the elephant in the room. And I think that's very important to just bring very early in the conversation, because whenever you're selling to someone, something that can be very evident, the mission and the plan you're proposing is committed to the outcomes rather than just, like I sold you this and whatever, it went well for me already, is the fact that you're willing to sit there and propose doing those things together and just like learn together very humbly. Humility about learning together about the process and understanding how to make the outcomes better. I think it's quite relevant for any strategy or any solution that has been sold in the name of biodiversity restoration.
Yeah. So for this sector, the key is you have to know how your product is going to work in the long term, how it's going to work for biodiversity, how it's going to work for environment, how it's going to work commercially, and then educating those stakeholders, investors, the partners, etc., the NGOs on that piece so you can take them with you.
Yeah, and I think especially whenever you're trying to push a solution that as you say, and I agree, it's probably very very new to the space, right? So it's a process of just learning, just deploying and see how it goes, right? Like the best way you have to prove something works is doing it. So simply just collectively deploying, integrating everyone that is important for that process, and enabling the spaces where you can be very transparent about it and learn together.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So how did you decide on Blusink's initial commercial route, that first kind of movement through? How did you come about that?
Yeah, I think as I was saying before, right, like the first commercial route was very much about carbon removal. And that was also our biggest pivot, right? Like carbon removal, sure, we can be a carbon removal company. We're probably making a better bet on what's going to be sustainable and what's going to last in the longer term if we also integrate biodiversity into it. So we started as a pretty straightforward carbon removal company, and across and along deployments, we realized for it to make sense for people in those deployments, in even the shorter term, biodiversity needed to be included. So yeah, I think that's pretty much how it went and how it's been building the more we learn.
Yeah. Okay. And what was the biggest strategic pivot you've had to make? Was it initial target markets, the pricing, the partners? What's the biggest thing you've had to change?
Integrating biodiversity again. I think that's the biggest pivot, right? Whenever you look at the CDR space, it's really about carbon for carbon. I think what we're saying is, if we're not investing in integrating biodiversity into the carbon space now, we're going to be paying for the unintended consequences later, right? So I think another pivot is probably, we like to have this systems thinking frameworks and whatever we do. So, and we understand that as three systems. The first system is the trade-off between carbon and biodiversity. That's one of them, or kind of like something that we are kind of like seeing constantly in the space, which is kind of like this understanding you can only do one effectively. The second one is just philanthropy when it comes to restoration projects. So something that we have evaluated within our business models is because we are deploying also in these restoration sites, and we're probably one of the only OE approaches that are actively working on optimizing their OE to be deployable at restoration sites and not just like very far from the coast in very ocean spaces where nothing is really happening. So evaluating that or enabling that for restoration sites also means that these restoration projects that don't need to just rely on philanthropy, but they can also rely in the longer term in profitable revenue sources. And that's very important because continuous revenue is very important for that trade-off I was talking about between funding, quality of those projects, and the time it takes. And the third system is just the material, right? OAE, especially OAE using very pure degree minerals, might pose a new demand for mining, which also emits CO2. What we've been doing very actively is trying to understand what mineral byproducts already exist in the industry and could be sintered into the nodules that we make for restoration, which is to my to my understanding quite of a good surprise about doing things that are longer lasting, because it means, sure, we're going to toss powders that might react faster and might capture CO2 faster, but we also, because of that same reason, have the opportunity to upcycle minerals, which means not contributing to that mining demand. So those are the three kind of islands that I can think about for that question.
I love it. Circular. I love the circular thinking. But one of our audience asked a question before the show, and they asked, how do you balance selling something, you're selling a commodity, with staying true to your mission of ocean health and environmental integrity? And how do you keep control of that?
Yeah, I think to be very frank, that's one of the hardest parts, because you're always gonna have this pressure to make the business more profitable in shorter time, right? But I think the simple answer to that one is aligning. So you really need to care about aligning your business model with the mission of the company. In our case, our business model is pretty aligned right now with making those restoration providers happy as well. We don't really get to access an area, deploy there, and expand those projects from the incubation or inception deployments if those restoration partners are not seeing results as well. Our mission is definitely to restore, and in that sense, removals. So that means the business model needs to be aligned. So we don't find ourselves in a couple of years just saying, sure, we deploy this technology that captures CO2 through a chemical pathway. We had no whatsoever on biodiversity in those places.
Okay, right. And how do you communicate value to impact-oriented partners and commercial clients?
I think probably for that one, it's more the end-to-end framework, right? So, of course, whenever you talk to a more impact-oriented partner, you discuss all of the aspects around enhancing conditions in those places, right? Like you discuss the metrics, you discuss more, let's say, closer to science aspects to the projects. Whenever you're talking to the other kind of partner, you get to do those things as well, but you also need to land it on the more practical sense of how this makes sense for it to scale, which is probably something that we should make more of an effort. And here I'm identifying more with the scientific community in that sense, right? Like you usually think if we discuss profitability, then we're probably dismissing important aspects for science, but science is really nothing if we don't get to execute at scale, right? Like it doesn't really have an impact. So I think having great ideas is great, right? Like for the scientific community, publishing great ideas on scientific papers is absolutely awesome. It doesn't really have an impact if no one grabs it and executes, right? Execution is the key for impact to be exerted. So so that's kind of like what we use. I think, to be very practical here, having a very honest conversation about all of these things, just taking the time to go sit with clients in person and having all of these reflections, I think is a very practical advice I could give to anyone out there trying to push a science-based idea.
Okay, wonderful. And what's worked best for you for building credibility with early partners or investors?
As I said, I think just doing it, right? At the very beginning, we were very reliant on just convincing the partners about doing something even downscale, right? So we would sure, this is very new. Like, to be very frank, not even, like we know how it's going to behave in your geography, in your ocean side, right? Like to this day, we've deployed in 8 different countries, split in 3 different continents, right? So those are very, very diverse ocean sites. We've never encountered the same, kind of like ecosystem composition in any of those sites. So what we usually do is we sit with the partners and we go like, we're willing to put the effort to deploy a very downscale deployment, which is not going to mean a significant or, hard to make financial decision for you. We'll learn with you. We're just going to see how it goes, and we make decisions from there. And I think that's heavily and positively impacted the way we understand engineering at the moment, right? Like we understand pretty well now for some places it's not just deploying directly on the seafloor, but maybe building some sort of floating structure to deploy. In some cases, we need to sort of fasten the Blusink keys to something or contain them into cages or whatnot. But that has come of convincing by showing.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for sharing. So are there any lessons you wish you knew earlier about scaling kind of deep tech ventures in ocean tech?
Probably the first and biggest lesson, and I think, again, this probably is going to hit harder for science background founders, is going to be talking to clients before you feel ready. Or probably, probably this goes for all founders. I do see it happening for all types of founders. Talking to the client before you feel ready, before the product is fully optimized for the scenario you're kind of like very hypothetically imagining.
Sell it and build it afterwards.
I do feel you need to build it. There's no way you can build it and prepare for all these scenarios before actually trying to work something out with a real client. So I think, definitely talking to clients, like start those non-technical conversations before you feel ready is very, very important.
Okay.
It's a very, very important piece of advice. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Great advice. But with a lot of startups, it doesn't have to be perfect. The core idea has to be there. You've got the base bones, and work with your clients to build the prototype. To get the right model or the right tech together.
Absolutely. I think, as a matter of fact, it's probably never going to be perfect, and that's fine. Because if it was fully optimized for something, you would also lose some adaptability. Right? So I think it's just like, I think a very, very common piece of advice is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And that's honestly very real when you're building a venture.
Yeah, so I work with quite a few clients on some AI transformation projects, and it's like they'll always jump straight to the tech and go, what does this need to do for us? It's like, what is your problem, or what is your problem you're trying to solve? Work that out, then go to the tech.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So looking ahead, what is next for Blusink? You're scaling, you're going in certification, you're going to new markets. What's happening next?
Yeah, so what's happening right now, it's validation, right? Like I see our company going through 3 phases to get to the point where we're going to get, right? Like in those phases is something that we call validation, then finally expansion, right? I think we're probably between validation and smart scaling right now. So validation typically goes around understanding the capture carbon efficiency of our material, right? That's something that we're advancing with very brilliant partners out there that are working on the modeling of the carbon, and just also validating physical chemical conditions of the places we deploy at. So just validation of carbon is something that is generally happening with us. A very big mission that we have to then go to smart scaling is we need to enable 2 things. The first thing is we need to, again, make a solution that is cheap and simple enough so anyone could deploy it, right? One part of our vision that goes to social and environmental co-benefits. And this is something that can be deployed by anyone. So even local communities can access with the right funding to their own carbon removal sites and businesses. So that's part of the smart scaling strategy. And then when it comes to carbon validation, because we're a unit-based system, meaning we manufacture, replicable Blusinks, right? Each Blusink is the same density, size, weight, mass as the next one. So what we envision is to have a big volume of the carbon capture efficiency per unit that would enable in the future to run the accountability of those removals by just the number of Blusinks we deployed, and not anymore the very intensive, especially deployments in which that needs to be quantified with very expensive equipment and labor intensive activities. So that's part of the smart scaling kind of phase we're touching on just now. And then when it comes to the expansion, again, I think one idea that I already mentioned is climate change is a very global problem. It needs a global solution. So in that expansion effort, what we see is probably a franchisable solution or business model in which, again, anyone could franchise the technology, manufacture, and deploy in their respective corners of the world.
Okay, brilliant. Smart, scalable, like it. It's ticking many commercial boxes. So have you got any advice for other ocean tech founders walking the science to market tightrope?
Yeah, I think again, just understand your mission is probably one of those. Founding is a very raw, hard experience, right? Anyone who would say otherwise would probably be sugar coating it, right? So I think understanding your mission is very, very important. It's okay if that's something that transforms, right, with time. But I think just having the clarity of what your real mission is, it's quite key. And it's quite key to also have that mission related to something that is not just profitability. Profitability, of course, is everything relevant for a business. But that profitability needs to have a differentiator and a way to actually set roots in the space. So, mission clarity. And I think probably the other one, again, would be just have the conversations very, very early in time. Knock on doors, right? Very, very practical about knocking on doors. Events are very important. It's important to say no to events sometimes, but events are very key because you get to have the very train conversations, elevator conversations that are going to be really shaping your understanding of where to go and how to get there.
Okay, thank you. And unfortunately, we are at the end of the episode. I could talk for hours on this subject. We'll just, like all of my guests, have a call to action. So one action the listeners could take to support you or ocean health or marine innovation?
Yeah, I think, probably my call to action is whenever you see a carbon removal solution out there or whenever you see any type of climate solution out there, really ask the question of what is that solution doing for biodiversity? Is it having any effect whatsoever? Is it having any social co-benefit? Again, environmental and social co-benefits are something that are not quite, economically framed at the moment, but that we really need to care about integrating into those funding frameworks and business models if we don't want to be paying for the unintended of not doing it so in the future. So just carbon removal should leave ecosystems stronger than it found it. That's the bar, understanding or relating to a carbon removal solution.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, okay, great call to action. Lorena, you've been a fantastic guest. Good luck with Blusink. I'm going to watch your journey closely, and we'll see you next time on A Drop in the Ocean. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to A Drop in the Ocean, helping us all amplify our impact. New episodes will be available from your streaming platform of choice. Please like, review, and share to help us spread these messages. See you next time.